Welcome to Vermonters in Business, where we highlight some of the very best business leaders in our state and the amazing things they're doing in their communities. People of Vermont, welcome to Vermonters in Business, where our mission is to highlight the businesses and business leaders in our state. They're doing amazing work in both of their careers and their communities. We've got a great show today. I'm excited. We're back, season 3, Travis.
Yes.
All right. But before we jump in too far, please join me in welcoming my co-host on the show. He is a serial entrepreneur, a local business enthusiast, and around here we know him as a world-class insurance agent. Travis, how are we doing today?
Doing
what kind
great.
of hot takes are we working with?
Oh, I got a great hot take today. We have a wonderful guest who's going to talk about fashion, and I always like to have my hot takes be related to the guest in some way. I feel like fashion has slowed from a trend standpoint, and what I mean by that is, like, if you think through decades, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, there was always like a fashion that outlined that decade. And maybe it's just because I'm getting old now and I've had the same pair of cargo shorts for 20 years. But I feel that fashion maybe is just now casual. Like, everything's casual. Business people are casual. Environment. Like, now you don't... Before, millionaires and billionaires wore suits. Now they wear, like, jeans and black T-shirts. So are we losing fashion trends, I guess, is my hot take. And there's no significant fashion to highlight the 2020s, if you will.
I feel like there's it's a lot of repeats of, like, prior decades, but you know what? Two guys with blue polos on probably aren't qualified.
That's why we have a professional
to be sitting here talking about fashion. So, all right. So joining us today is Taice Perrotti. Taice, how are you?
I'm great. Thanks for
Awesome.
having me. I didn't realize this is the kickoff of season 3.
Yeah,
Awesome.
the first
Great.
episode.
Good.
So Taice is the owner of Archery Close in Stowe. It's a boutique fashion store. So Taice, tell us a little bit about how you got started in the fashion industry, I guess.
Well, I have actually no experience in fashion before I opened the store.
That's awesome.
Just
Went on a limb.
Went on a limb.
Yeah.
I have always loved fashion. I've always been drawn to it. I remember as a kid trying to save up my money to buy my first pair of Zacavaricis. Do you remember Zacavaricis?
Yeah.
And Benetton, which sadly has gone out of business. So always been interested in fashion. And when we moved to London, when our kids were really little, we lived in this amazing neighborhood.
Oh, awesome.
It had the best fashion boutiques, I think.
Yeah.
And we lived on a street called Archery Close, which is where the name comes from.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
It's not a play on words for clothes,
Yeah.
anything like that. And at that time, I was working part-time for a company back in Boston, but I was like, these people seem to have it down. Like, I like their lives.
Right.
They always seem happy. They seem excited to go to work. I've always been interested. I was like, someday I'm going to do this.
Right.
I'm going to own a boutique. Fast
cool.
forward, moved to Stowe, and
Nice.
just jumped in.
That's awesome. I love the name, but you didn't give us the London detail on your sheet. I was going to ask, you're originally from Catskill, New York. How did you end up in Vermont? But there was a stop in London
There's
along
a
the
lot
way.
of stops.
Yeah.
I mean, life is short, so you got to make the most of it.
Yeah.
So grew up in the mountains. Started coming to Stowe when I was maybe 7 or 8 years old. Always loved Stowe. Kept saying, this is such quintessential Main Street.
Yeah.
I love the feel of it. And that was my dream one day, too, to move to Vermont. And then moved from Catskill, went to college, moved to Boston to London, back to Boston, and COVID led us to Stowe for real. Yeah.
That's nice. What college?
I went to William Smith. It's a small college upstate New York.
Sure.
Yeah,
Very nice.
it's tiny.
Yeah. And how many years were you in Boston?
20 years.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Jeez.
Yeah.
You had the full experience there.
I had the full experience. Yeah. I lived in 20 years in Boston, then moved to London for a bit, back to Boston.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we're going to dive into a little bit more about Archery Close and everything you have going on. But first, every guest that comes on the show jumps into what we call the Vermonter hot seat questions. Taice, are you ready to jump into the hot seat?
I'm ready.
All right. Pancakes or waffles? What are you having with your Vermont maple syrup?
Pancakes.
All right. Good answer. A perfect day for you. Is it a winter day at the mountain or a summer day at the lake?
Ooh. Oh, man.
You got to pick.
I have to pick. I'm going to go summer day, at the Waterbury Reservoir.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Very cool. I was wondering because, Stowe is you think you kind of have to say,
I can be contrarian.
Yeah, I like it. It is your birthday dinner. You can go anywhere in the state. Where are you headed?
It's next week.
Oh,
yeah.
All right.
So this could be
Fantastic.
maybe I could make this a dream.
Yeah.
I'm going to go like a dirty martini and french fries at the tavern in Edson Hill.
Okay. Very nice.
Yeah.
Manifest it, all right?
Yeah.
So
Manifesting.
I'll get to the editors. We'll see if we can crank this out quick and like put it on social media and see if the family like.
Call my husband.
Yeah. All right. It's a hot summer day. What's your creamy order and from where?
Okay, so this might sound weird.
Yeah, no, go for it.
But if you ever can get a black raspberry maple creamy swirl together, have you tried it?
I haven't, but I've heard people talk about it.
Yeah.
It's good, and I didn't mean to order it, but I did, and I was surprised.
It feels like a hard thing that you could misorder, though.
Well, because I was like, I'll have the twist, meaning
I see.
I was like, oh, it's going to be a maple creamy and vanilla.
Right.
That's what I assumed the twist is, but that's not what they have.
Where are they doing this?
It was at Red Barn in Stowe.
Okay.
But my favorite creamy is actually at Cafe on Main.
Okay.
Also in Stowe.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, I'm always intrigued because it's like, I wonder who thought of we should mix the black cherry with the maple creamy.
Yeah.
And apparently it works because they put it on the menu.
Right.
Yeah,
Exactly.
Yeah. It's somebody's mistake, probably, that turned into
happy mistake.
happy mistake.
Yeah.
That's usually how it happens.
All right, well, that's it for the Vermont hot seat questions, so you survived. Good job.
Okay, thanks. I'm a little nervous.
Travis, let's jump in and talk a little bit more about Archery Close.
Yeah, so you talked about not having any background. So what was the process? Like, what was the genesis of it all? Being in London, obviously being back in Boston, you had this idea, but when did you start putting pen to paper and being like, this is what we're going to do, and how did it all evolve?
Well, I feel like the signs come at you at certain times, right? And I was living in Stowe, and I used to shop at a bunch of the stores in town. And one of the stores, the woman was moving, and so she had a space that was built out already for a store. And I went in one day, and I said I was sad that she was leaving, and we kind of joked about it, like, haha, you should just take over my lease.
Yeah.
You should open a boutique. And my husband was traveling, luckily, so I was like, that sounds great.
Yeah.
I'll just do that. And him and I did chat on the phone a few times while he was away, but by the time he got back, I had left my job and decided to do it.
Good for you.
Yeah.
So you kind of purchased an existing, so it wasn't from scratch.
So
really.
I took over her lease, so I had, 3 years. I knew I was in it, and I was like, it's just 3 years. What's 3 years? And it was all built out, so it had the shelves, it had the racks, it had all of that.
Yeah.
So it felt like it was an easy jump into your first business.
Sure.
And one of the things you said was, the support you get from a lot of the local businesses as well. Tell us about how the community of Stowe, the village, and everything helps with your business.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't have done it without going around to the stores I had been shopping at and talking to them and saying, I'm thinking of doing this.
Yeah.
What do you use for your point of sale?
Right.
How do you, manage your staff? Where are you getting your staff? And everyone just was really open and helpful. Nobody had their guard up. Everybody was like, yes, there's enough, piece of the pie to go around.
Sure.
Like, you should do this.
Yeah. It's always nice when there's people that don't want to collaborate in that way.
Yes.
Instead of like shell in and think, oh no, I don't want another competitor. And it's like, but when you can kind of build on that and you guys can kind of work hand in hand, it really goes a long ways to growing a community.
Yeah.
And Stowe must be, I feel anyway, it's a great location for your type of business because you have that strong, year-round support, but then you have the tourism and everything that's coming through. Have you noticed that?
The majority of our, business comes from locals and part-time homeowners.
Nice.
For sure.
Yeah.
The tourism, yes, for sure, but you can't rely on the tourism.
Right.
Which is good and bad for the business.
Yeah.
Like, you can still make it then if tourism goes away. But it's also really nice. We get to really know our customers because they're coming all the time. They're really regular. You get that relationship. You know what they're looking for.
Right.
You can help suit their needs. And you get to know how they like to dress, where you can push them a little bit. So that's been fun.
It's funny you bring that up because I remember several years back being at Stowe Mercantile and having a conversation with someone there. And I said, oh, the winter must be great for you guys. And they said, actually, the winter isn't because when people go to the mountain, they stay at the mountain.
Yeah.
They don't go downtown into the village. They don't shop. And is your business seasonal in that aspect as well, where maybe the leaf peeper season's better or... summertime?
Yeah, it goes fall, summer, winter, spring.
Yep.
Just like that. And that's probably my favorite seasons, too.
Okay. Yeah.
So it goes in order. But we recently moved.
Yes, I was going to bring that
so
up. Yeah.
we were on Main Street,
Yep.
which that was really hard for those seasonal tourists
Sure.
to come all the way to Main Street if they're up at the mountain or if they're Waterbury Res or whatever they're doing.
Yep.
But we're farther up the mountain road now, so
Right.
we do see people that are coming in at least to like rent their skis, they'll come as far as the ski shops.
Right.
So that's been good.
So with that expansion, you expanded kind of like your product lines as well, right? You want to talk? Let's talk a little bit about
Yeah.
what's in the store. What do you
Yeah.
offer?
We started the store just as women's. It was a tiny store on Main Street, just women's fashion. It's ready to wear, so not like high, couture stuff, but
Sure.
but things you can just like nice knit sweaters, but also things that if you're going to a special event and you want a nice dress or you need
Yeah.
something, a little fancier. And then 2 years after we opened the store, we added men's. So we opened a men's store upstairs, bringing kind of everything because we're the only men's store within like a 45-minute
Right.
radius.
Yeah.
So now once we expanded, we put men's and women's together as one location. And recently we got a new puppy, so we added some dog stuff.
There you
Nice.
go.
As the puppy demanded,
Yep.
so we listened.
Yeah.
And then we've added, we have perfumes and a few little gifty things. We do that stuff, which is really nice, and we can hold a lot more events for the community.
Right.
Which I really like
Yeah.
having it be a space
That's
people
very
can
cool.
gather.
Yeah.
And how do you get the clothing? So I think people have this image of like, Paris and Milan and London, but what's dictating the styles that you're carrying? Is it the fashion trends or the consumer, and where are you getting the clothes? Like, how do you determine what to purchase?
Well, there's a logistical side of that,
Yep.
and then there's also like the brands that we work with, like our moral compass is if it aligns kind of side of it.
Sure.
First is like, what do I like to wear?
Yeah.
And my husband does the men's set buying, and I
Yeah.
do the women's. So what do we like to wear? Is it nice material? Is it comfortable? Is it a little fashion forward?
Right.
And then what do our customers need? Like where are we fitting in for the piece of what other
Yeah.
stores don't already offer?
Right.
And then we look at those brands and do those brands align with, are they ethically sourcing the materials? Are they paying fair wages to their employees? If they have like a give back program to the community, that's a little bit like a bonus point.
Right.
And then we also look like, are they easy to work with? I'm sure you like your customers that are easy to work,
Right.
your clients
Yeah,
that are
for
easy
sure.
to work with. They probably get a call back quicker. So do they have a rep that we know like one point of contact, a rep that we can always call if we have questions? Are they a fast fashion brand? Then they're an absolute no. So we look at brands that are just literally making clothes to order, so there's not waste.
Yep.
Which means the logistical part of getting the clothes. In February, we'll go and we'll meet in, not Milan, but I could go to Milan. I just don't have time.
Yeah.
We go to New York and Chicago, meet with all of our brands in show houses and showrooms.
Okay.
And we look at samples of what they think they're going to be making for the following fall.
Okay.
So 6 to 9 months in advance, and they'll show you this blue polo.
Right.
I think this is going to be something we're making.
Yeah.
And then if we like it, we make our picks. All the other stores do the same. And then they actually go back and decide what they're going to make. And they take all those orders and they just make that. So it's
interesting.
made to order.
Nice.
So there isn't, billions of pounds of blue polos in
Yep.
the landfills.
And so about 6 to 9 month lead up from the next season
Yeah.
is roughly what you're looking at?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so I assume if that's the way you're purchasing, then you have a limited supply of each item. You're not, 50 of the blue polo shirt.
Right,
you're
right,
carrying
right.
something.
I'll
Yes.
take all 50.
You take
Yeah,
them.
yeah,
Wear them every day.
yeah.
That's the uniform. It's very, so I also like the FOMO aspect a little
Right,
bit
yeah,
of when
that's where I was
customers come
gonna go,
into the
yeah.
store.
Yeah.
Like I like them to know, like I have one of those.
Right.
And so some pieces that are super special, if it's like a beaded full length coat, like
Yeah.
you only want to have one of those walking around town.
Well, that's what I was going to say. You're not going to show up at a wedding in Stowe and 4 women are wearing the same dress
Never.
from your
Yeah,
boutique,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
So,
Yeah. It's also funny because women do come in like, I'm going to this person's party.
Right,
Does
right.
anyone get this dress? And I have to like keep mental track of
Yeah.
like who's wearing what.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
that is funny.
Yeah.
Let me jump in.
Yeah.
I just, so if the procurement part of all that is fascinating because there's a lot of steps in there. What was the learning curve like for you coming from the outside of the industry entirely to know that like, all right, I want to look for this. I want to look for ethically sourced. I want to look for, not somebody that's, fast order, I think you called it, or
fast fashion.
Like how did you come through all that, from the ground up to figure out exactly this is what our, ideal, provider is.
Yeah. So, I mean, I've worked in business my whole career before this.
Yeah.
So I kind of was like, all right, we need like a mission statement.
Yeah.
We need core values. When you're starting any business, I think it's good to just start with that.
Yeah.
Start with how much money do you want to put in and then just break it down. But I kind of picked clothes, like, I don't wear clothes that are fast fashion in general.
Yeah.
So I was picking brands that I already knew
Okay.
that I felt like had good moral and ethical standards.
Nice.
Yeah.
It's cool. I mean, it's such a fascinating thing to see somebody just jump into a business, and then, have it evolve in this way so quickly,
Yeah.
Yeah, no, especially the fashion industry, because again, like I said, there's so much behind the scenes where you're always like, because you'll go to, if you go to like craft fairs or vendor fairs or farmers markets and stuff, you see people with clothing, but they're not making the clothing. So they're getting that clothing from stuff. So you're always just kind of trying to figure out, it's like, what's the process behind that?
Yeah.
And so that is very interesting. And you brought up a great point about being really the only men's clothing store in a 45-minute radius. And I do think that's something, you have a unique business and a unique shop where there's always this online purchase battle and, supporting local businesses and smaller businesses. And my argument is always, there's a spot for your business if you do it the right way. And I think it sounds like you're doing it the right way because you have that demand and you're expanding and growing. Can you touch upon that, like how as a local, retailer, you're competing with some of the larger entities and getting people to go to your place?
Yeah. Well, so we still do business online for sure. We do probably 13% of our annual business online. Okay. But I feel like those are such different buckets, right? So for our online business, we compete with bigger brands. So our online presence looks like we're a bigger store, so I feel like we still, we have the look and the feel that you can, if you're shopping online, you want to buy this and we offer free shipping and this other big store doesn't, you're probably just going to go with us because it's easier for the consumer who does shop online. As far as like in-store shopping, we try to align with other stores in town that everybody kind of sticks in their own lane.
Okay.
So, one store carries this for like a more bohemian look. And then I carry, like maybe some like funkier colors and patterns. And then the other store just focuses on like denim.
Right.
So I think like you can compete to like all tides rise, all ships type of thing. So it's a healthy competition.
Nice.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming, you have people in the store who help folks who come in and are like, I don't know how to match anything or what goes well with it.
I'm colorblind.
Yeah. So I'm sure you have people there who
usually
can
the
assist.
men,
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you can't be colorblind to work in my store. I'm just kidding. I actually don't ask that. That'd be funny. Like everyone working for me was like, I don't know if it goes together. So that's the best part of the job.
Right.
Honestly, like somebody comes in and they're just like, help me, or they don't know how to dress their body. They feel like they hate this or they hate that. Well, everyone loves, there's always something good you can find in there.
Right.
So making people feel good in what they're wearing is honestly the best part.
Yep. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. I know it's always a challenge for my wife. She always gets so discouraged when she shops.
Yeah.
I'm just like, no, you gotta
send her to the store.
I know.
Yeah.
She needs to.
Yeah.
So you've expanded a new location. What are your, crystal ball? I know you joked about, you bounced around. You don't like to stay in one place for too long. But what's your crystal ball for the store, for the business?
End goal is it's semi-retirement. I don't want to work forever.
Yep.
So it's just like becomes something where we have enough staff that my husband and I can just do the buying trips.
Right.
And that's when we start to go to Milan.
Yeah.
And that's where you're like, we're going to Paris to buy.
Yeah.
We're going to, Copenhagen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But one location, do you ever see
multiple
going
locations?
to multiple locations or just focusing on that one?
We've talked about it. I won't say where, and it would be years down the road.
Right.
But yeah, we've talked about having another location. And people do come in the store. They're like, where else are you located? Because it has a big feel, when you go into the new space.
And once you've mastered, I'm assuming this, especially this type of business, once you've mastered it in one location, you can duplicate it pretty easily.
Yeah.
But your biggest challenge obviously would be the staff. And so,
Yeah.
finding someone who can manage it for you and you can, like you said, you can take those trips would be the ultimate goal.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, staff is the hardest part of the job.
Yep.
Finding staff, like they have to be that person that can help people, that wants to work on the weekends.
Right.
As I'm sure you know this, like having a business, like staffing is the most important part and the hardest part.
And then the staffing is difficult, but personality obviously has got to be like your biggest challenge with staff, especially in your type of, establishment. Because I know when we shop, you can go into some places, people are too chatty or they're not talkative at all. They're just sitting at the counter. Let me know if you need it.
Yeah.
So, it must be difficult to find that great personality where, they can interact with the customer, but also be able to read the customer a little bit.
Yeah, 100%. And we have all sorts of customers. I memean, we're typically like 35 to 65, but some guys don't want to be talked to at all.
Right.
We also have some teens that come in because like we are the only men's shop in 45-minute radius. So we'll have teens come in that they just need, their mom's like, you need to wear a pair of pants that aren't jeans or sweatpants.
Yeah.
So having a person that can jump in and give advice, that they don't want to hear from their parents, is also
nice.
Yeah, it's also challenging.
Well, you said you had repeat customers, and one of the questions I had was, do you dictate the fashion to the customer, or are you getting a lot of feedback from the customers, like this is what we would like to see, and then going out and trying to find that within the companies you like to work with?
So it's funny. So fashion trends, when you opened the show, you were talking about that. I have a few pins on that. I think I feel like you don't really know what the decade was until you're beyond it.
Right.
And then you look back, you're
that's fair.
Right, the 80s were like neon and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
But casual is a fashion trend, right?
Yeah.
So definitely people are asking for casual. They want comfortable, like COVID and Zoom have changed the way we work.
We're in the joggers trend. If I'm using my kids as a reference to like joggers.
Yeah, 100%. So we definitely try to provide enough of what people want, but I like to push people a little bit out of their comfort zone. I mean, I know I'm dressed in black today because it's a gray day outside. But normally I wear a lot of bright colors. But it's interesting when you go to the shows, you'll see the same thing repeating from designer to designer to designer for the season. And it's so interesting to me, and this is where I would love to talk to designers more, like, why is everyone using powder blue for fall winter 25? Right. Did you guys get together and decide
this is the palette?
This is the palette. It's chocolate and powdered blue, which is true. That's happening in fall winter. So a lot of it, you go and you're like, oh, I'm going to focus on these colors because I know they're going to be trends for that upcoming season. And you definitely want to buy things that are on trend because your customers want to feel like you're swaying them towards the trends and not away from the trends. So you have to have a little bit of blend. Like if they're asking for joggers, make it a powder blue jogger.
Right.
But then also throw in something that maybe something with a pattern, like a powder blue chocolate pattern jogger.
Okay.
And then you have a good blend of it all.
Because I always remember hearing stories. I have 2 sons, so it wasn't an issue with my kids, but hearing stories of people who had daughters, and there were always, the complaints about, oh, that's all that's available for girls. I don't want them to wear that, but that's all that's in the store.
Oh, so it's basically no clothes, crop tops.
And so
everything's tight.
And so I'm like, is that just the fashion designers forcing this is all you're going to have, or is it more, what the consumer is wanting? So that's why I asked that question, because there's got to be more variety than just everyone looking, brown boots and black leggings at UVM, right?
Right. Yeah. And a lot of that is kids are more, they like to do things in groups, right? So
you're dealing, but obviously your clientele is more adult who
yeah.
doesn't really care. They're not following
Yeah.
the herd mentality, if you will.
Right. They follow like what they think, what styles, what colors look good on their body.
Right.
Not like everyone's wearing, black spandex. So so should I.
Yes,
exactly. Man, you just came out of yoga.
No, I just dress like this all the time.
Do you have it?
Yeah, so 4 years in the shop now.
Yep.
One of the things that we like to do is and kind of what you touched on with business owners helping other business owners. When you look back, is there something that you would have changed or done differently or maybe done sooner? Looking back on the 4-year history that you have so far?
Man, I guess I wish I was open to change more radically in the beginning because I outgrew the space very fast.
Sure.
And it took me, 3.5 years to move. And my
Right.
husband was like, we need bigger space.
Yeah,
we need
yeah.
bigger space. And I'm like, I'm good. This is good.
Yeah.
Like, I'm just getting into the groove.
Right.
So I think I could have expanded faster and
Sure.
served more people and had, more diversity of like what I could carry if I was more aggressive in that. But,
Okay.
But it's also like a new business.
Right.
Where you got to baby step it.
Yeah, totally.
And
No, I
yeah.
get it, and it's always challenging too because I'm somebody that can be like risk adverse, and so I'd look at that as like, oh man, that just seems really risky.
Yeah.
But if you think of the positive side of it, of like, well, what if it like really is a home run and we move to this,
Yeah.
and that's the mindset with running a risk and taking risk.
Yeah.
Risk
that
adverse insurance
need to have.
I was just
Go
going to
figure.
say, I was like,
Shocker,
don't
right?
you have to be risk averse to be an insurance agent?
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah.
But sometimes you need to take a little risk, and
Yeah.
what's we're sports guys, so there's always seems to be some sort of sports reference that comes up. But
Yeah.
if they say, Travis, scared money don't make money.
That's true.
Yeah.
It's very true. Hey, we went from 9 employees to 21 now.
Yeah.
I mean, it happens. So.
But awesome.
Yeah.
Anything else, Travis?
No, anything you want to else we missed or you want to
Well, I
bring
do
up?
think we need to touch on the fact that you want to be a chef in your next life.
Yes.
What's the deal
yeah.
there?
Well, it's something that I just always have loved, and I never kind of got
Yeah.
around to it because
Yeah.
life, making good life decisions came to the way.
Right.
I was like, I guess I'll go to a regular school
Right, right.
and get a regular degree and like be responsible.
Yeah. So you guys foodies at home, or what's the deal?
Yeah, love to eat when we travel, try
Yeah.
new stuff. I feel like every time we go on vacation, the first stop is like a grocery store and
Yeah.
just like check out what's new,
Right.
things you've never seen. So yeah, very food driven family, I
Cool.
guess I would say.
I think we're kind of the same way.
Yeah,
Yeah.
nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, and I know I told you this in my
Yeah.
the form I filled out before.
Yeah.
Is that I kind of like to change careers every 7 years.
Yeah.
And I did one thing for 7,
Yeah,
another thing
3-year
for 7,
window.
another thing for 7. Now this is the 4th thing that I'm doing,
Yeah.
and I have 3 more years. So who
Yeah.
knows? I mean, I could put a kitchen in the basement,
There you
maybe,
go.
and
Yeah.
close
Serve
some food.
creamies.
Yeah, serve some swirly creamies. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, this has been another episode of Vermonters of Business. We appreciate you coming on the show.
thank you very much.
If anybody
Yeah.
out there knows any guests that we should have, we'd be happy to host them. Just send a name our way. But thanks.
Perfect.
That's it.
Thank
you.
Cool.
Thanks, guys.
Awesome. Good job.
Thanks.